Got it. We'll go step by step using the 7 key points I outlined earlier. Let's start with key point 1, hook, the shocking July number and why it matters now. July delivered a number that's hard to ignore, a $291 billion deficit in just 1 month. Think about that for a moment. In 31 days, the government spent $291 billion more than it brought in. That's like a household earning $5,000 in a month but spending $9,000, plugging the gap with more debt. But here's what makes this figure even more striking. July was a month when tariff revenues actually went up. Yes, the government collected more money from taxes on imported goods, and yet the deficit didn't shrink. It exploded. This is more than a quirky accounting detail. It's a red flag that something deeper is going on with how the nation's budget works. Politicians often say tariffs can pay for themselves and help close the gap, but July's data tells a different story. So the question we need to ask is simple. How can the government bring in more money and still fall further into debt? The answer takes us into the balance between income, spending, and a hidden cost that's been quietly rising, one that affects not just Washington's books, but our wallets too. A monthly deficit is not some complicated, mysterious concept. It simply means that in July, the government's income, all the taxes, tariffs, and other revenues, wasn't enough to cover what it spent. That's it. The difference between what came in and what went out was negative. And in this case, the shortfall was enormous, $291 billion. To put that in perspective, imagine your household budget. If you earn $4,000 this month but spend $6,000, you've got a $2,000 gap. You can only cover it by dipping into savings or borrowing. The government does the same, except instead of a few $1,000s, the numbers are in the hundreds of billions. Now, it's true that certain months naturally show bigger deficits or surpluses because of timing. Some taxes are collected at specific points in the year. Some big payments, like certain benefits or contracts, are scheduled for particular months. July can be one of those months where expenses bunch up. But here's the key part. Timing alone doesn't explain this gap. The trend has been building for months. Yes, revenue is going up, but spending is climbing even faster. That's the imbalance we need to understand. And it's the imbalance that turns even a good news story about rising tariffs into a bigger deficit headline. And that takes us to the next piece of the puzzle, the role of tariffs themselves and why the promise attached to them didn't play out in July. Tariffs are basically taxes on imported goods. When a product comes into the country, whether it's a car, a phone, or a bag of coffee beans, the importer pays a fee to the government. In theory, this serves two purposes. It raises revenue for the Treasury, and it makes imported goods more expensive, which can encourage people to buy from domestic producers instead. Politically, tariffs have been sold as a two-for-one solution. The pitch sounds simple. We'll collect more money and protect our industries at the same time. Some even argue that tariffs could help close the budget deficit all by themselves. But July's numbers tell us why that promise didn't hold up. Yes, tariff revenue went up. The government took in more money from imports than before. But when you compare that extra income to the total amount the government spends, it's tiny. Imagine finding $50 on the street. It's nice, but if your monthly bills are $5,000, it barely makes a dent. And there's another catch: tariffs can have side effects. Importers often pass the cost of tariffs on to consumers in the form of higher prices. That means everyday items from electronics to home appliances can get more expensive. Over time, if imports slow down because people are buying less, tariff revenue can actually shrink. So in July, even with tariffs doing their job of bringing in more money, the scale of government spending and other rising costs completely overwhelmed those gains. Which brings us to the biggest hidden cost in the entire budget picture: interest on the national debt. This is why July's deficit swelled so much. Tariffs added revenue, yes, but the rise in interest payments, along with other spending, easily outpaced that gain. It's like pouring water into a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. You can pour faster, but if the hole is getting bigger, the bucket still empties. And here's where the numbers start to become personal. Because when government interest costs rise, they don't just stay in Washington. They flow into the rates you and I pay on everything from car loans to credit cards. When the government's interest costs rise, it sets off a chain reaction that reaches far beyond federal accounting. Here's how it works. The rates the government pays to borrow money influence the rates banks and lenders charge everyone else. If Washington has to offer higher interest to attract investors, banks follow suit. And suddenly, mortgages, car loans, credit cards, and small business loans all get more expensive. For households, that means higher monthly payments. A family trying to buy a home might see their mortgage cost hundreds more per month than it would have a couple of years ago. Someone carrying credit card debt might find it harder to pay down the balance because interest charges are eating up more of their payment.